Some of you may have seen us present on the Technology Radar before. It's a publication we've been putting out every 6 months or so for a few years now. And we love to go into the technical details. If get Sam and I alone, and we will go on endlessly about some of the detailed and interesting technologies on there. And we usually do that when we do a radar presentation. We go through kind of blip by blip and talk about the wondrous miracle of software technology. But we thought we'd take a different tack this time, and we'd like to lead with the business. So what we're going to do is tell you a few stories about customers around the world that have managed to achieve some kind of business success through use of the techniques that we have on the radar this time, the most recent publication that came out in May, and some of the radars past as well. So if you'd like to talk more about the technology, we'd be happy to do that at some point. But right now, we're going to focus more on the business. And I think Gareth did a good job of introducing us. I'm called the head of technology. I'm doing my best to avoid defining exactly what that means. I'll let Sam offer any.
Exactly the same for me. I'm doing everything I can to avoid explaining what a global innovation lead actually does, other than fly around a lot. We're defining that as we speak. We're doing some blue ocean strategy thinking about that as part of our double bag synergy exercise or something.
Yeah, I just try and add value and do things that are useful. So I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about business disruption. So I don't think it comes as a surprise or it's news to any of you that we live in an age of accelerating business model disruption, a lot of that driven by technology. If you have a successful business model that's working for you today, just wait about 5 years, and it won't be anymore. There are people right now plotting to disrupt your business, your competitors in the marketplace. Small people that you probably don't even know about yet will cause a disruption in your market. I mean, there's some examples here. A local example, Aussie Post, their traditional mail business has been shrinking for some time, and they're valiantly trying to enter the digital market and be a new, relevant, viable business in the digital age with the digital mailbox. If you may have seen Horace Dediu talking earlier this year, about Apple and Samsung and the remarkable flip-flop of the positions in the marketplace in terms of especially profits that companies are making in the smartphone marketplace. 3 or 4 years ago, Apple and Samsung weren't even a blip on the radar. The traditional manufacturers like Nokia, Motorola, whatever, were making all the profits on smartphones. Today, they account for 100% of those profits. So in just a matter of 4 years or so, Apple and Samsung have completely displaced Nokia and Motorola and Ericsson from the smartphone market. Why is this? Well, there's a few forces. This is one way to look at it. There are many forces at play, right? But this is just a few that we've noticed. Economic constraints, obviously, since the GFC. Everybody's trying to do more with less. That's more true today in Australia than it probably was a year ago. Everybody's feeling that pinch and trying to get more out of their technology dollars. The need for agility with a small a, so that's the need to be responsive to customers. So things are changing quickly, and there are competitive pressures happening all the time, and we need to be able to respond quickly to our customers. And those customers expect really fast response. We had the rise of the millennials, of the digital natives. They expect a different level of engagement with the companies that they do business with. They expect a certain amount of responsiveness, and they expect a certain amount of emotional engagement from the way that they interact with companies. It's no longer simply a passively offering services up to people. And finally, the democratization of technology, which plays into this as well. It's really hard to come into work using your iPhone and you're on Path or Twitter or whatever, nicely designed and refined user interface that makes it easy to interact with an organization or your peers, and then get to work and you're faced with this Siebel screen full of drop-down menus and difficult to use, slow software. It's really inhumane, and the democratization, the availability of inexpensive technology has raised people's expectations of how they're going to interact with businesses. If we just look at one measure of success, this is Forbes' rating of the 5 most innovative companies in the world last year in 2012. You might argue maybe there should be a couple of others up there, but I don't think any of us would have too much trouble with these. You may not be aware of Baidu. If you have been in China, you will be very much aware of Baidu. In fact, we compete in the labor marketplace with Baidu quite heavily in China. They hire some really good developers, and they have an Amazon social and e-commerce platform that all of China uses extensively. So the message here is that these are technology business. These innovative companies, they do traditional things, but technology actually is their business. You cannot easily separate what is technology, there's no service provided to the actual brick and mortar business. It's all one thing. I met with a CIO of a local bakery chain in Australia, and a couple of years ago, and she said, innovation for us is really a new bread recipe. IT, we don't innovate in IT. Nobody's looking for innovation in IT. That's just a service that enhances our basic business model, which is better bread. And that is a business model that's ripe for disruption. If they don't see the potential in the digital marketplace for their traditional product, which is bread and bakery goods, take Domino's for an example. Domino's Pizza, making pizza, how much more ordinary and physical could that be? Yet Domino's is very much a digital business. 50% of their sales are online, and all of the innovation that's taking place in Domino's today is happening in automating their production process and making it easier for people to buy pizzas in creative, novel ways. So technology is important to success in all businesses, regardless of what business you're in. But how do you choose the right technology? It's a rapidly changing landscape. We have this mystique around technology that only the software people know how to use it and know how to make the right decisions. And if people happen to hit on the right technology, it's a matter of accident or serendipity. Well, it's not entirely true. It is possible to track these things, but you need to be conscious of it. You need to be aware. And one of the tools that we use at ThoughtWorks is this technology radar. We make it a publication, but we use it internally as well to understand what's out on the fringes, what's new, which of these things show the most promise, which of these things do we need to watch, and when is the right time for us to start using it and offering it to our customers to give them a competitive advantage. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the radar and how we put it together and what it means.
So this, as Scott said, the most recent radar came out in May. We'll be off to Beijing, I think, in November to create the next one, which will come out around December, January time. And the key thing for us is that every 6 months we get to look back at the technology we picked before and see what new things have come up. We often see motion and movement and discourse around these blips, and they can be quite controversial. Just so you're aware, there's an awful lot of controversy that happens inside ThoughtWorks too. There's about 12 to 14 of us on the tab, and we get together in a room. Here's, look at that hair. So here's us in a room arguing about all sorts of things. There's normally our CTO, Rebecca Parsons, up there is gamefully trying to corral the conversations we're having. The radar itself has probably around 100 to 120 blips on it. We probably come up with 3 times that many items during this 3-day process, trying to cull these things down. The key thing is this is real-world experience from ThoughtWorkers. There's 2,500 people in ThoughtWorks, of which probably about 1,800 are technology consultants working on client projects, on client sites. And we basically harvest all of that information and the information from our colleagues and the wider software community to really put this stuff up there on the radar. The radar, if you're not familiar with it, and if you're not, I do suggest you go and download it after this session. It's split into 4 quadrants. It's a way of us to help categorize the things we're looking at. We have techniques, tools, platforms, and languages and frameworks. We're especially passionate about the power for new types of languages to make the process of creating software even more efficient and effective. So there's a reason we highlight languages quite heavily. Within those 4 quadrants, the technologies are actually categorized into 4 rings. we have hold, assess, trial, and adopt. The hold ring is for technologies which we think are either not ready yet, and we think it's a waste of time to worry too much about them because they might die off or go somewhere else. An example recently of something like that would be Google Dart. It's also for those technologies and techniques where we think their day has come and gone. We've put store procedures, enterprise service buses, and most controversially of all, Maven and Backbone recently. We get more flack for things in the hold ring than the rest of the radar put together. And I think it's fair to say we do more time thinking about what goes in the hold ring than any other ring. In assess, if you're a company that sees itself as a real technology innovator, this may be the place where you want to look for things that are 6 to 12 months that are going to deliver some real benefits to you and your organization. These are things that we're quite interested in and passionate in, but maybe are not things we've been able to use in anger, but we think show real promise. For things to get into trial, we need to have used them on a production project for a client or on our own production systems internally. These are things that we think if you're an early adopter, somebody that's looking to continue your excellence in technology, these are things you should be looking to look at in the next sort of 3-month cycle. Things in adopt, these are just cast iron, very reliable piece of technology that we think any organization that's in the business of IT should be happy using. Must be very clear to say the radar is very much opinionated. This is a qualitative document based on us arguing a lot internally. If you get 2 thought workers in a room, you get 3 conflicting opinions. You can imagine what 14 thought workers do with 3 whole days to argue. It's very much opinionated. We're happy to have a conversation about your opinions on the radar as well. We do that afterwards. We also try and make it specific. We try not to be generic and say graph databases. If there's a clear winner in the graph database spectrum, we will talk about it. We only ever are generic about an item on the radar where there is no clear winner, and where that is the case, we'll try and talk about it. An example would be JavaScript MVC frameworks. And also this is first-hand. This is based on experience of ourselves, on our projects, working for clients, working internally, all those people in the wider industry that we very much trust. These are typically personal relationships. This is always trying to be first-hand stuff. We're not sort of third-hand via an analyst. What we're going to do is talk about now 4 stories and talk about the different technologies that were on the radar and how that played a part in the business successes that these organizations had. And we're going to start with the world of wealth management.
Yeah, so wealth management. This is a story about one of our customers, IOOF. As some of you are probably all in this industry, you're probably aware that there have been a lot of legislative changes in the superannuation industry over the last couple of years. The stronger super legislation, which includes MySuper, means that all superannuation providers are required to have a portable product that can be easily moved from one provider to another, and that contributions to these funds and transfers of these funds from one provider to another can be done through electronic messaging. So what this means is that there's a tremendous amount of work right now in receiving these electronic messages whose format is described by the federal government, and then taking that data, moving it around, making some additions to internal systems, and then sending those messages out to other people. So it's communicating with platforms, communicating with the ATO, communicating with banks, communicating with other superannuation providers. So this is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the delivery capacity of these wealth management companies. So just meeting these legislative deadlines is quite challenging. And this is at a time when it's pretty hard to attract new people into this industry. You know, on the surface, it doesn't seem like the most exciting of jobs when you could go to work for a web startup or some kind of a company with a more innovative reputation. But in fact, there are some interesting problems here, but it's hard to attract new people into this industry. And the thing you need to focus on for this story is these two dates. So January 1st and July 1st of this year were some of the deadlines that were specified in the MySuper legislation. So we look at this project. There was IOOF embarked on a project to meet these compliance demands in August of last year. So in order to meet the January 1st deadline, there was a phase 1 of the project, and that was done in their legacy language, right? They have a platform like most of you. They have a platform, they have standards within their organization that makes it easy for them to deploy applications because they've seen those kinds of applications before. So they did that first bit in Java, and we're about to embark on phase 2, which was to actually be able to receive transfers of the MySuper product from other superannuation providers by that deadline. And the team realized after phase 1 that they needed to do things more efficiently. They had not made the progress that they wanted. Part of this was due to the platform they were developing on, but they felt like, you know, what we're doing, this taking data, munging it around, spitting it out in different forms, is very well suited to a class of programming languages that we call functional languages. So I won't go into too much detail. We'd love to talk about that in some more detail, but there was Scala and Clojure are functional languages that run on top of your existing infrastructure that can be deployed into legacy systems. And they have the potential to make this much simpler, to make this kind of programming much simpler. And I don't want to go, I know this is scary. Don't get too upset about the code here. I don't expect you to understand this code, but I do want to illustrate why these functional languages make things simpler and make things faster. So look at this. This is Java code. It's actually well-written Java code. I want you to just let the squiggles and the angle brackets and dots to kind of wash over you. I challenge you to understand what this means. What it is it's taking in a file. It's determining what kind of file it is. It's transforming that file, picking the right transformation, transforming that file, and then spitting another file out with a date stamp. So that's obvious from here, right? Now I want to show you the same code rewritten in the Clojure programming language. So this does exactly the same thing. And there's a couple of things you should note about this. One is that it's shorter, obviously. There's less code here. The less code you have, the less prone it is to errors, the less chance there is for something to go wrong. And the other thing is that it's readable. You know, it's written, there are English words here like transformer. We're going to transform. We're going to find the transformer, and we're going to create the new contents. We're going to spit out a file, date. These are all words. These are all kind of domain concepts that people can understand. And once you get used to the syntax here, it actually, which is very slim, there isn't much to it. It's very easy to understand what's going on. It's easy for another programmer to come along and understand what the business intent of this was. So these things require, they have the potential to make things better. They have the potential to work faster, but they require new skills. So how do you know what skills, or how do you know when you want to make that investment in those new skills? And how do you choose the right tools? We have Scala and Clojure up here, but these are two different languages. There are different camps. And how do you know which developers you want to attract into your organization? Because one of the key things about programming languages is that programmers tend to organize themselves into tribes around these programming languages. And each tribe has a different culture. They have a different mindset as to what constitutes quality. They have a different mindset about how testing should be done and so on. So you have to accept that by adopting a new language, you're also adopting that culture. So how do you know? We never get the chance. People always make claims, and a lot of this boils down to religious arguments. People make claims that one programming language is better than another programming language, but nobody actually does an experiment. Now, the thing here is these guys had an opportunity to run an experiment. So there was a 3-week gap between the time that phase 1 was delivered and when phase 2 was supposed to start. So what they did is they embarked on an experiment to write the same thing in Scala, Clojure, and Java, and see which one the team liked the best. So they set out, the entire team rotated around between the 3 languages. They kept track of various subjective and objective measures, and this is what they came up with. So this is, up here, we see the objective measure of time spent in various activities with these 3 languages. With Java, they spent a lot of time messing around with tools. Anybody who's done Java programming probably would agree that there is a lot of tools. There's a little bit of time finding the right libraries, but the culture is pretty well set so that we know which libraries to use. And there was a little bit of time writing code. That's in the blue down here. With Scala, there was about equal time spent among all these activities. There was a lot of time spent finding the right tools, a lot of time spent finding the right libraries to bring in, because Scala is a complex and varied kind of language and environment. And then they spent some time writing tests and some time writing code. With Clojure, up here in the upper right, almost no time was spent trying to find the right libraries. A lot of it's built into the language. They spent some time getting the right tools, but they spent a lot of time writing tests and a lot of time writing code. Down here you can see the kind of the subjective sentiment of the team measured in various ways and aggregated. So with Java, you can kind of see it goes up. Java's here in black. You can see it kind of starting down low. There's a bit of excitement here in the middle, and then they ended on a low note. With Scala, it was kind of up and down throughout the course of the experiment. With Clojure, you can see there was kind of a peak of excitement, a trough of disillusionment, and then people gradually, as they progressed through the learning curve, came to like it more and more. And the team at the end voted for Clojure. So there was a few, people that really liked Scala. There was one guy that really liked his Java. But for the most part, they found that they could be more productive in Clojure. And in fact, they did embark, and phase 2 was done in the Clojure language. They met the legislative deadlines. In fact, they met the deadlines early and were able to bring in new requirements from the next phase of development. And along the way, IOOF was also able to streamline a lot of their internal processes. They're an organization that's grown by acquisition, so they have a lot of heterogeneity in their back-end systems, and they use this as an opportunity to bring some of those together and to rationalize some of their, not just their systems, but their processes as well. So they brought forward those cost savings of reducing the amount of human error and increasing, reducing the time it takes to place an order, for example, from a week to just a day or so. So that's the business outcomes for that, and we move on. Oh, the other thing that we need to mention is that is a benefit that many people see from these new languages. It's hard to quantify in business terms, but it's the ability to attract a different kind of quality and a different kind of developer into the business. So IOOF now has this secret sauce, right? They can put job ads out here asking for Clojure developers, and they know they're going to get people with a passion for learning, a passion for quality, and people who want to learn and work on the cutting edge. And that's a big advantage to the business.
I think it's also worth saying as well that this isn't like an outlier. This isn't the only Clojure project in the world. We've just actually went live, big project in London. It's a large bespoke content management system with some very complex back-end legacy integration challenges. That project went live 2 months early. It was 300K under budget. I've got colleagues working, and sort of ex-colleagues and sort of friends in the industry in London working at Citibank, UBS, and Deutsche Bank, all using Clojure in the financial space. So it is now gaining some traction in those areas where manipulation of data, sort of algorithms are key. So it's something worth looking at if you're in that sort of space, that you're looking for a different kind of culture or some efficiency gains. So from wealth management, we're now going to talk about test cricket. No, I meant, social data. They made me take out the picture of Ian Bell. So instead we're going to talk about social data. And specifically, we're going to talk about an organisation in the UK that provides a platform for fundraising. I'm sure looking around, there's a few people here with beards and things. You're probably familiar with Movember. Our own Keith Dodds every year shaves off his moustache and raises money for charity. And on the Movember website, you can actually go and put a page of yourself up with your big bushy moustache and help raise money for a worthy cause. In the UK, we have a platform that actually allows you to raise money for a variety of causes through a variety of different means. It might be someone like Gareth doing City to Surf. By the way, you should congratulate Gareth afterwards. He did City to Surf in under an hour. I'm assuming there's a following wind and a sail involved in that. Or like me, you could sit in a bath of baked beans and raise money for cancer research or something like that. And so you have this social activity of, here's me, here's the thing I'm raising money for. You'll go around to your colleagues at work, your friends down the pub, and say, oh, go on, give us a £5. Here's my website. You can just go and donate directly. So they handle all things like the payment escrow, talking directly to the charities. And they're really passionate about what is it we can do to raise more money for these worthy causes. And so this organisation has a lot of raw data about their users. They kind of know, well, the money is taken in and everything else, but they didn't really know what to do with that information. They're thinking there must be more we can do with the information we hold about the people raising money, the people giving money, but they weren't kind of sure what it is they wanted to do. So how can we use that information to be more valuable, not only for the charities, but also more valuable for the people raising money? And so we were already working with them to do some mobile applications. And so what we discussed was basically us carrying out a 6-week experiment to see what could we do with this data. Was there opportunity inside this data? I've lost track of how many times I've heard people tell me that big data is the new oil. The other week someone told me that big data is the old oil, which made me very confused about what big data. Anyway, I got very confused. But nonetheless, we know big data is a hot topic and they'd heard about this too. It's what can we do with all this? So it's like they wanted to ask questions of the data they couldn't actually ask, that they felt might lead them to new products or new features that they could offer. Things like, if I'm a fundraiser, who else could give to me? What is the giving power of my friends? A charity looking at people that have given to them in the past, maybe they could harness the people that can raise especially large amounts of money. What could they do to support those people? And vice versa, what could I do to, say, remind people in my network that have the power to give and have given to me in the past and remind them about my baked bean stint that's coming up? And really it all comes down to, how can I raise more money? How can we collectively raise more money? Now, like many systems, their data is stored in a traditional table structure. So here we have a sort of table here of maybe users in the system and their login names. And there's another table somewhere else for the campaign and a table for who's given what to whom. And these sort of relational tables are the staple of systems around inventory, around account management and things like that. But they give you a very sort of, I see this view of the world, and that's sort of how the tools around it are around these sort of static views. In reality, though, fundraising is an inherently social activity. I remember as a kid going around to my friends' parents and saying, can you sponsor me £1 to do a fun run? I had a little piece of paper and people wrote it down. It was all trust as to whether I actually got the money. And that's just come into the digital area. But inherently, there's still the social contract between people here. I'm going to give you money, you're going to go do the thing. Most of the time, the people that give to you are people you know. And so we think about the relationships between people. So here I'm giving money to Scott for his 24-hour mandolin recital. Scott's maybe giving me $15 to wear a tie. It's not going to happen. And we've got Scott here maybe giving $15 to Hannah for a fun run or something like that. And it's not just the act of giving for this particular campaign, it's also the history we had together. When someone says, I'll go on, I'm going to shave my moustache. I did sponsor you $15 for that rickshaw ride, you should do that. And there's that kind of thing going on. But we see these things in rigid tables. What we wanted to do as part of this experiment was take the data they had and put it into a different form that would allow us to visualize these sorts of relationships, not only for a specific campaign, but over a period of time, and understand, could we get more value out of that? So looking at the radar, we actually picked up a technology we used a few times before, which is Neo4j. The area of graph databases allows you to model these relationships. We've been working with Neo for a number of years, and we're very impressed with its capabilities to model these things effectively. Again, this is an example of us being specific. There are other graph databases. In almost all cases, we've picked Neo. Neo allows you to visualize, to actually model things in a very fluid, flexible way. The first couple of weeks, though, was still, how do you take these relational database structures and model them in a graph? There's so much flexibility in a graph that you actually get a lot more choices about how to model it, which means decisions to be made. But eventually, we sort of harnessed this into some form, and then we took advantage of some of the open source tools around Neo to actually start visualizing these relationships. So this is an example screenshot from a tool called Gephi, which is an open source tool. And here we can start to see groupings of relationships, and they're color-coded based on human heuristics. really interesting thing comes about is you don't really need to know what the data is, but you can start to see there's some obvious groupings here. This stuff is very highly connected, this is very highly connected, this is very highly connected. That then starts allowing you to just ask questions of that data. Well, what are those groups? How are they related? Can I do something with that information? Now, obviously, with sort of 10 years worth of fundraising data, we had a vast amount of data loaded up into this Neo4j instance. And so we gradually had to start pruning it down. And we could visualize these sorts of relationships and start seeing these groups, but we needed to zero in on a few examples. And so one of the things we started doing was asking questions of a specific fundraising activity using Neo4j to understand what are the new features we could add. We actually picked on a fundraising activity which one of my colleagues, Angela Ashworth, did, where she and her husband took a motorised rickshaw drive, I think, up through Indonesia. And so they were raising money for this, and we thought, well, what does the graph tell us about Angela? So here's Angela in the middle, and straight away when we modelled her and looked at the people who had given money to her and the relationships between those people, we started seeing some obvious groupings emerge. We have this group out here, which are, I believe, her Facebook friends. We had this group here, which we found very quickly was actually ThoughtWorkers. People she works with. That makes sense. You know, you'll go to the kitchen, you'll bump into people at the water cooler and say, hey, give us some money. This group here are actually people that work at Angela's husband's company. Obviously, they were both doing this rickshaw ride together. It happened to be her page, but his friends were sort of giving to them as well. That was good. That's interesting. Okay. So we start to see these obvious social groupings emerge. But we also went a bit further and started looking at other people in those groupings that hadn't already given to her. There's actually a cluster of people out here that are in the ThoughtWorks group, for example, that hadn't actually given Angela money for this campaign. Who are those people? We actually found one individual who Angela had given to 3 separate times but had never given back to her. We thought, well, this could be interesting. Thinking of the social contract, maybe we could give some feature where that person could be reminded or guilted into it. So Angela was wondering who that person was who had never given to her, and she'd given to him. Turned out it was me. So she did this big talk about this and said, Sam, you're going to come along. It's a great talk. And halfway through, she brought up a big picture of my face to shame me into giving her money. But this is an interesting, right? You've taken one example, you've gone from millions of nodes very rapidly down to a few use cases, and what is it we can learn from this information? And ultimately, what came out of this were a series of heuristics that allow us to do some rough groupings, look at social networks around this giving activity, and actually start to reach those groups. Now, this was an experiment off to one side, but we understood from that activity that we had the potential here to actually reach out different groups and potentially increase the giving power of any given social network. In terms of the concrete benefits to the business, really what they've now seen is a path towards some new features. We're now working with that organisation to take those example questions we were asked in the experiment and make them production-ready features. So as part of your campaign, you have raised $5,800, but 25% of but only 25% of your social groups have actually given. Click a button to send them a reminder. Something that simple that can come from analysis of the graphs in this way. So this sort of what if, could we do this, what experiments can we run, is now hopefully leading to a series of new production features that should have the end result of raising more money for charity and for good causes. And speaking of raising money.
Yeah, so somehow I let Sam get all the hipster topics here, and we moved from wealth management to the exciting world of global tax equalization. So I know you'll all enjoy. So this is a story about PwC's International Assignee Services. So if you're someone like me, so an American whose tax home and residence is Australia, who also works in India and China, you probably spend all of your time doing tax returns. I know I do. So I never have a time of the year when I don't have a tax return hanging over my head somehow. And what I find is that I have to keep entering the same information every time. So there are 3 different countries, 3 different tax years, but my income's the same, my birthday is the same, my address is the same, all of that stuff remains the same. So I wonder, why do I have to enter this separately in all these places? And this is one of the things PwC is trying to address with the system that they've built. They don't just do the taxes, they also manage global mobility, so things like visas, people's travel, those kinds of things, assignments. And in this world, the streamlined experience of entering your tax data becomes a real competitive differentiator. So PwC, KPMG, they both hopefully do your taxes correctly, right? They're going to come up with the right answer, and they're going to come up with the same tax settlement for the employer in the end. But the experience that you have with them could be different. So they really need to compete on this, and technology itself becomes a key differentiator for these organizations. One of the interesting things about this is it's truly a global business, right? First of all, accountancies by their nature are collections of separate businesses. So they're separate partners all over the world who have come together and run their business under a single brand. But the assignees go all over. So you have an essentially distributed, decentralized business, but with people who move from business to business. So if you do, and the processes are different in each one of these businesses. The tax software that they use is different. The process by which they manage the tax returns and the milestones they hit along the way are different in each one of these offices. But the assignees could be all over the place, accessing and entering their tax data via the public internet. So this is very private data, obviously. Then the tax preparers are also distributed all over the world, and they're trying to share this information. They have to share the same information through their backend systems on a VPN and the tax information, and then send that data back to the assignees for signatures and so on. So this is, as you can imagine, a very complicated compliance scenario. Meeting simultaneously the compliance laws of all these different countries, where you put the data and how you treat it is a very complex problem. And the way that their business has evolved is the same as probably many of yours. They're big monolithic systems that have grown up mostly in response to historical events around these particular kinds of activities that they do. So these functional sort of activities. So tax questionnaires and the assignee accounts is one big monolithic system. The system that manages millions of PDF files, with signatures and so on, and consent forms, is another monolithic system. The back office work. So managing understanding where the return is at any given point in time, understanding the engagement with the employer, those kinds of things, all in a back office system. And of course, this information has to be shared via email notifications and different kinds of tax preparation software and so on. And this worked fine as long as it was confined to just a few channels out here. But the impetus for change for this organization was the same as probably it is for many of you. It was when they decided to roll out a mobile calendar. So it's very convenient if you're traveling. Obviously, your tax return is heavily influenced by what dates you were in which country. Also, your visa applications, for example. So it was important to give people an easy way to enter their travel dates, and they created a mobile application for that. And that meant that that calendar information had to be shared across the tax prep systems and from that mobile application. And these traditional systems that present a screen full of data, and then the screen full of data goes back and a transaction happens on the back end, are not necessarily well suited to mobile applications. And so they found that they could roll out a new system, a small service that just supplied calendar data, that supplied that calendar data both to the tax prep systems, to the tax forms, and to the calendar, the mobile application for the calendar. Now, if you look at these things, calendar is really a sort of a different concept than these others. These are big functional systems that do many different things and combine many different concepts, business concepts in them. Calendar is one isolated thing. It's for the technical, it's a domain concept. This is a single bounded domain context, the calendar. Now, as the development progressed on this, and these are products that they've maintained over a number of years, they found two things. The first is that it got very slow to make changes. And we found this with big systems everywhere, that these big systems, no matter how well written the code was initially, as the code base grows larger, as the system grows larger and more complex, it becomes slower and slower to maintain it. The other thing they found is that a lot of this stuff is duplicated. Just like the calendar data, a lot of information, a lot of domain concepts are duplicated across these systems and have to be synced up together. So they moved to a new platform, a new kind of architecture, and realized that instead of these monolithic systems, what we have is a bunch of collaborating services. So the calendar was a very successful concept and was really the first of many small services to be split out of this and kept maintained separately on their own. I like the Lego analogy here. So Legos, there's a few things about Legos you might notice. One is, although they come in different sizes and different shapes and different colors, they all have some nubs on top and some receptacles on the bottom to allow them to be stuck together. They have what we like to call a uniform interface. So every Lego has a uniform interface that allows it to be connected to other Legos. Another thing about Legos is they're identical. That if you have a green rectangular shaped Lego and that Lego breaks, you can throw it away and you can quickly replace it with another green rectangular shaped Lego. As long as it has the same functionality, as long as it has the same shape and plays the same role. So we created many different services, small services like this. These are services that could be easily rewritten. And some people are taking this to the extreme of creating very small services that can be written in a matter of a couple of weeks. And in that situation, maintenance becomes much less of a problem. And all this tied together with federated identity. So in order to manage these different personas that are accessing the data, in order to provide the right privacy protections, and also but open up to the right people on the back end, we have federated identity so that you can use different kinds of credentials depending on whether you're coming over the public internet or whether you're coming in through internal systems. Now, the really interesting thing about Legos, though, is that they can be used to build different things. So you can create vastly different shapes with the same set of building blocks. And in the same way, PwC was able to create different kinds of systems reusing these same fundamental building blocks. So if you think about it, filling out visa forms is much the same as entering tax data. So they were able to roll out a visa service so that you had a single questionnaire to satisfy many different visa jurisdictions with the same basic building blocks that created the tax questionnaires. There are a few technology enablers. So this is a nice idea, right? We've been talking about service-oriented architecture forever, and we've seen it implemented badly forever as well. And there's a few things that you need to have in place to make this successful. The first, in this case, PwC is heavily invested in Microsoft platform. So the open source tools, there is an emerging open source community on top of the .NET platform that make a lot of these things much easier than you would find with the Microsoft tools. Another thing is the idea of continuous delivery. So we talk a lot about continuous delivery, but without complete automation of the pipeline from development into the production system, we could not manage this. If you had 10, 20 services that you have to deploy and keep straight, you absolutely have to automate everything. And finally, using web-based integration. In our case, with these services, the uniform interface, right, the little nubs and receptacles on the Legos is HTTP. HTTP, as long as we have that in place, we know that we have the infrastructure and we have the understanding to be able to create new services and wire those services to other services and reliably be able to communicate via a well-understood contract, which would be the number of nubs and the shape and the color and so on of each Lego. So the benefits of this. First of all, being accountants, they like to measure everything. So we know that the number of online submissions has grown considerably over the time that this was developed. We also know that the time to do a tax return has gone down. It's currently 20% less than it was a couple of years ago, and that time is going down. So people are able to complete their taxes more quickly. They're getting these things out faster to market, so the visas application was rolled out much more quickly than the single questionnaire tax data, and they were able to reuse many of the pieces in there to do the visas, and that's resulting in winning more work. So this is just one example of accounting services, audit services. PwC recently displaced KPMG. That's a lot of acronyms, isn't it, at HBSC. And then we get also from this architecture very flexible security and privacy. So that means we can protect, rather than having a firewall sitting in front of a bunch of monoliths, we can protect the individual endpoints of each of these services. We can dismiss the delusion that we have some walled garden into which no intruder can penetrate. We actually can protect each one of these systems and give it the right level of privacy and protection that it needs to be able to meet all the compliance laws. And then we have a lot of flexibility around performance. So because of the globally distributed nature of this, you can imagine that accessing from Finland the file is maybe not as fast as it is accessing it from the UK. So being able to put files close to where the assignees are, being able to put data where it's most easily accessible, and being able to put data where the compliance laws most best suited is a huge advantage, and that's one of the advantages we get with this distributed architecture.
So, of course, if you're now able to live in many countries, you have to get there. And one way you can get there, that's an awful segue, I do apologise. We're now going to talk about travel. Some of you may know about a company called lastminute.com. It started in the UK. They're actually one of the darlings of the .com boom. They had their IPO the day before the crash. Actually, well, it's the first time around. That shows you how much of a darling they are. They sort of specialise in last-minute hotel or theatre bookings. They're actually part now of a group that includes Zuji, who both Last Minute and Zuji operate in Australia, and they're part of the Travelocity group, I'm sure many of you have heard of, who are actually ultimately owned by Sabre, who also provide other services to the travel industry. Now, when Scott earlier talked about disruption, he mentioned actually disruption in the smartphone sector. And Last Minute, over a period of time, have been seeing a huge growth in the number of people coming to their services via mobile device. I don't expect you to make out the numbers at the back there, but you can see from the bottom here, from the first quarter 2011, we had around 7% of their searches were coming from mobile. And as of the end of last year, that was 26% for holiday packages and up to about 40% for airlines. And they understood that they hadn't really created an experience around mobile that understood or reflected the affordances of a mobile device. They effectively had done the standard, we'll just make our desktop app kind of work on a mobile device. And their concern was that other players in the market, and this is a very highly competitive market, hotels will put their inventory wherever they can to get rid of it, and there are many different places that can come into this market. It's just an intermediary-based business, so it's not that hard actually for a new entrant to come in place. And their concern was those organisations that were creating mobile-first experiences were going to take some of that market. They were finding that although the searches were coming in, they weren't necessarily getting the returns either on those searches that they wanted. So they wanted to embark on an activity to create an application that would better target mobile users, and so he came and spoke to us about that. We've done some work with some of the people there previously, and we started talking about the need to really embed within the organisation a concept of rapid experimentation and really putting the customer at the heart of that process. Scott talked earlier about continuous delivery, whereby we can take applications and quickly deploy them to production environments. That's great in terms of trying things out in production, but there are also ways of actually trying things out in different ways with a much lower levels of investment. And so what we're going to do with this organisation is we borrowed a lot of ideas from things like the lean startup movement and from things like the Deming cycle to create a process by which we would learn and experiment around the application together. This idea of having a space where anybody could come up with an idea, where we could build that thing together, get it out in front of the customer, learn from that information, and then decide where we're going to go next. In terms of the radar and things on the radar, there's one particular blip I wanted to call out, and that's one called guerrilla testing. This became a vital part in us understanding how the application was going to be used before we'd necessarily made large investments. When we're thinking about these sort of lean startup type movements, and you're thinking about the learn and the experimentation, how can you do that as cheaply as possible? The whole thing about lean startup is failing as fast as possible, learning as much valuable data as you can when you fail. What can we do in that space? And guerrilla testing is an approach whereby you actually take the application you're testing in some way, shape or form to where the users are and actually have them use it. It's very low-fi, very cheap activity, but can deliver hugely valuable data. So what we're really focusing on in this story is what are the things we did around this learning activity to help them create the right application for that business. There's a few other things that were really different maybe about how this organisation went about doing things and creating this new application, which we actually think are the future for all digital organisations in terms of how they manage their projects. The first thing was that they weren't focusing on a deliverable in terms of we will have a new piece of software with these features. That for them was a side product of achieving a business outcome. So success was outcome based. So very early on in the project, there was a decision about what were the core KPIs that were important to us. And those were the things we were targeting. You know, for your own organisations, this might be orders, a revenue increase, an improvement in your net promoter score. For Last Minute, there was a conversation about what was important for them, and they were the governing factors. And this scorecard was visible to everybody in the whole team. In this way of creating a very tightly collaborative team during this 20-week process, everybody sat together, everybody was co-located. Here's a picture of the team area. There's John Crosby, who was the CTO, is now being promoted since. It's one good business outcome has come of this project. Here's all the delivery team working together. We've got the UI people embedded with the team, and the chief architect is passed out on the floor. So, but this idea of the scorecard and its rapid ideation also led itself to the traditional sort of iteration board. I'm sure many of you have seen swim lanes with stories moving across and velocity graphs burning up. What does a wall look like, though, when you're actually focusing on the ideas and the experimentation? So here's actually the main idea wall. So you've got your sort of standard, you know, the delivery work here, but this was the wall that had far more attention. So here we have the ideas and concepts that people are coming up with. Lots of ideas that were coming out throughout the process of this activity, people throwing these out. We're getting insights from the analytics team as we go. And this is the thing we're really interested in here, is building the prototypes and then testing them. Now, ThoughtWorks, as you know, we have a 5,000 strong user experience testing lab in a hollowed out volcano who come up with all kinds of interesting ideas as how we can do very expensive user testing for you. And this is what we came up with. This is a 2-pound USB camera connected to a laptop. That's actually a hair clip, connecting it to an iPhone and actually helping fix that iPhone on the table. This is all so that we can test some sort of static HTML versions of the initial application and get feedback. So we did this traditional thing with things like paper prototypes where people got a sense of the flows. But then what we did was create static HTML versions of that app, and a very early version. This was a few weeks in before we'd built any of the back-end systems or any of the integration points to understand were we reaching the right sort of experience for our customer. So this is actually a picture from one of the sessions where we'd have one of the designers and sometimes one of the BAs would be there, or sometimes a developer, just to sit and observe. And here's one of the customers. So Last Minute reached out to some previous customers and got them in. And we got some really good video from this. I will say now that the video you're about to see does contain views that are not the same as those expressed by me or my company. You'll see why I say that. But nonetheless, I'd like to show you an example video from Nigel.
Okay, so let's say I need to book a place in, for want of another city, New York.
We can start recording.
So it's a hotel, so I'm going to hotel search. Yeah, this is all quite good. I think the buttons here could be the icons and the buttons could be a bit larger. Like certainly the plus minus could do with being bolder. Dates mean nothing to me, it's all about the days. So if there was some way of having, today's date right up there, I don't need to see yesterday's
Sure.
dates. So if you could make these two lines disappear so they're actually lined up with the days a bit more,
So it
that would
brings
be
today to
really,
the top.
yeah, that would be really convenient. That's interesting. It's immediately preset to 2 adults. I wouldn't do that.
Right. Okay.
I happen to be married, but there's a whole bunch of women out there who don't want to be reminded that they're not.
Right.
Just a thing.
Yeah.
What are you expecting to see now? Well, it's thinking what kind of screen would like to see after this?
I actually don't care. Just make it really fast. So, the important thing for me is I don't even know if there's availability for the day, and I don't actually know the price. I know that there's an average. So it's not a major fail, but I don't know if you guys have played around with Kayak. It's a little bit more.
One of the key things when you go out and do this sort of qualitative-based testing is you're going to get a lot of information, and it's down to your experience and your understanding as to what sort of that experience you take on board. Not all of the feedback we got from Nigel was taken on board. Some of it was, though. And likewise, if you went through all the user feedback data and looked at the app, it doesn't necessarily reflect what everybody told us. But there was a hugely valuable experience in terms of just getting some of the obvious things knocked out. It still comes down to expertise to know what decisions to make. We actually spoke to around 80 customers in a 16-week process, and as part of this, Last Minute are now actually setting up their own usability lab to help drive all products forward in this way. We also were doing standard things like cohort analysis of the conversion funnels. We were moving through this process. This is sort of fake data, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things we were capturing. So we could see how the different releases of the software were converting. And this is in terms of real data. This is all the quantitative stuff we were also capturing. This experience of working closely with their customers was sort of so valuable that they decided to take it to the next level. Okay, if we can get a lot of value from one conversation with one customer on one day, what could we do if we actually reached, say, 20 or 50 customers over a period of a week and brought much more of the team actually to the team? So I'm going to play one more short video showing that example.
We've seen 100% growth in our traffic in the last 12 months. Nearly half of our sales are for same-day bookings on the mobile phone. So increasingly our customers expect that last-minute booking experience to be in their pocket and on their phone. So this week we're in the Cumberland Hotel. We've moved our design team from our office. We've set up a design studio in the lobby. And this week we're talking to customers and showing them our future designs for lastminute.com and looking to get their insight and feedback so we know we're creating products and services that they really care about.
It's a site you trust.
I like to use lastminute.com for holidays, for hotel bookings, because I know that I'll get my money's worth.
It's also very simple to use. It's not difficult or too technical.
I love the quirkiness of it, which is what always brings me back to it.
One of the key things is to really listen, try and understand what we could do better in the future, where we're going wrong, what we can improve upon. And it's great just to do face-to-face with customers as much as possible, really.
So what we really want to do is figure out, among all of the crazy ideas we have for an amazing app, which one will customers love? Which one will make them say, wow, want to download it, want to share it with their friends, and make a splash? So our goal is really to come up with a wow mobile app.
We're starting off today with a whole bunch of ideas, really kind of wide range, and the plan is that we take a handful of these ideas forward through the week, start actually mocking up some concepts and prototypes, start testing that with users. So hopefully by the end of the week we've got some really good customer feedback.
I would use a mobile app for lastminute.com if it was maybe picking up our locations or where you're at and maybe advising you on the local areas that you're staying in.
Definitely the price is an issue. The location is also important for me.
The iteration wall is the hub of our week. Essentially all of our ideas live on this wall and we see them evolve from basic concept through different design stages to full prototypes on the screen of a mobile phone. So we're trying this new approach so that we can have more feedback in one day than we may get in a month.
And so this activity for them proved hugely valuable. For them, though, they went where their customers were, which in the case of people selling hotels is actually a hotel. You can grab your market and find your market share. I mean, I did some work with the people in the Cabinet Office in the UK. Their customers are on the street because they're all the taxpayers. I did some work on a mobile phone app for tourists. We were in London and we thought, where are we going to find tourists in London? We just walked down to Covent Garden and actually walking around with a USB rig and a release form. You're getting hugely valuable information out of this activity. In the case of Last Minute, as was mentioned in that video, they actually managed to double the number of orders being placed via their mobile channel. So you saw that sort of gradual growth, and that was just searches. They actually managed to double the number of orders there being placed. But the platform they actually created is now going to be used not only across Last Minute in the UK and Europe, but also for Zuji and Travelocity. A large amount of the work was actually integrating with the existing systems from Travelocity and Sabre. We were able to do that at the same time as create a platform where this experimentation could take place and these new releases could be pushed out. We could actually push out a new production release from a developer's laptop check-in to production in 12 minutes. So as well as doubling the orders, the value of those orders also had doubled as well. So the individual orders themselves were proving to be much more valuable and much more useful for them. And as I say, this is something they're carrying forward in the rest of their development processes.
Just really quickly, to close the loop on this idea of how do you track technology and how do you know when's the right time to jump on a particular technology. Everybody lives in a different place on this adoption curve, right? You may be early adopters, you may be late adopters. The important thing for you is to understand where you sit with regards to each one of these technologies, and that's where the radar helps us. We use it in a variety of different ways, and we think that it can be useful to your business as well in a variety of different ways. But it facilitates conversations. It allows us to have conversations between the technical and the semi-technical. It allows the business and technology to talk about how to align. And it's a kind of a signpost as you go along the way. It's not the goal. You're not shooting to achieve some technological goal, but it is a way to mark your progress and to understand where you are on the path towards your strategic goals. A number of our customers have created their own radars, each of them slightly different. So I'll let Sam describe that.
So we actually work with customers creating their own radars for your own, maybe you've got your own strategy for your own organization. The radar is a great tool for communication and actually a consensus building activity. So helping facilitate customers building these things together, getting developers on the ground with the architects, with the development managers, with CTOs, to create a unified view of the technology strategy for an organization. This is actually from a company we work with in the US. They actually added a remove ring. So for us, we say you should really stop doing that. For them, they had some technologies they were using that were so bad for them that they were actively going to remove it. This is the cane toad ring. You find a cane toad, you're taking that guy out. So they had things in there. It's kind of interesting, right? Because they put things like OSGI in there, which is a technology we're really not a fan of. But for some of our customers, it's something they're quite passionate about. But for them, they've been bitten so badly by it, they're actively trying to remove it and root it out. And many of the other rings make sense for them, but it gives them an opportunity to put in, say, technology that might be specific to them or their domain. We're never going to talk on the technology radar about particular payment escrow services that we're going to use. But if you're a digital online retailer where you might have multiple escrows in the mix, that might be appropriate for you to say, look, we're retiring this use of this system. Here's the one we're moving to. Here's the one we should look at in the future. And many other organizations have taken this idea of the radar and done some very different things with it. If you're interested in having us actually work with you to facilitate creating radars for yourself, and actually as a side product of which creating radars for your individuals in your teams that can become career radars for them, then just grab myself or Scott or Keith or Gareth who are in the room.